Chapter 6, Creating a Nation. Chapter 6, Section 1, For the Revolutionary Army Officers, the Newburgh Conspiracy. The Newburgh Conspiracy took place after the Revolutionary War, when Army officers planned a meeting at Newburgh, New York, to overthrow the government. The Army officers were upset because they hadn't been paid, they were losing their land, and had exhausted their resources. The Articles of Confederation was too weak to levy taxes to pay necessary goods. Alexander Hamilton argued the government needed to generate revenue through tax, but Congress vetoed requests to tax citizens. George Washington arrived in Newburgh, surprising the officers and talked them out of a military coup to overthrow the government. He knew people wouldn't challenge him. He also knew that they couldn't allow Congress to be overthrown, because that would make the United States vulnerable for a British takeover. For poor white farmers, Shay's Rebellion. In 1786, Massachusetts farmers asked for tax relief as states tried to pay off war debts. Government leaders blamed farmers for their own struggle. Government courts began foreclosing on farms whose owners owed money, so farmers stormed the courts and stopped court proceedings. The Massachusetts government responded by passing the Riot Act, which prohibited gatherings of 12 or more. In January of 1787, Daniel Shays and his group of rebels called Regulators attacked the Massachusetts arsenal to overthrow the Massachusetts state government. The Massachusetts state militia defeated the rebels who were trying to attack the arsenal. The rebels hurt themselves because they were unorganized and had mixed up days for their attack. In 1788, the economy recovered, which provided natural relief to citizens who were struggling. Shay's rebellion helped lead to the Constitutional Congress to push for better protections of citizens and stronger central government. For white settlers moving west. In 1785, the Northwest Territory set up territorial governments in the future states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. The Northwest Territory also divided land into sections and made provisions for public schools. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 banned slavery in the Northwest Territory, mandated religious freedom, and the beginning of public schools. Congress tried to settle Western land claims after existing states had claimed new land in the West, and Native Americans had no intention of giving up their land. In 1791, Vermont entered the Union as the first new state to the original 13. In 1792, Kentucky entered the Union as a slave state because slavery had already existed in the area. In 1796, Tennessee became the 16th state to enter the Union. For American Indians. The Treaty of Paris, which ended the Revolutionary War, gave Native American lands away to the United States. Native Americans ignored this because they weren't part of the treaty negotiations when the treaty was signed. Some Native Americans, like Joseph Brant, were given land in British Canada. In 1783, Congress raised an army to occupy British forts, but couldn't raise the money to pay them, showing the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. In 1785 to 86, Joseph Brant organized the Indian Confederation with the Mohawk, Iroquois, and Cherokee to battle the United States, leading to more conflicts as white settlers moved west. The frontier was violent, and the Articles of Confederation was too weak to do anything about it. Americans were now calling for a stronger central government to secure the country. For slaves, former slaves, and those who claimed ownership of them. The abolitionist movement had gained ground during the American Revolution, and by 1789, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont had abolished slavery. The northern states with more slaves set up systems for emancipation, but it would be almost 1850 before slavery disappeared in the North. Slavery held strong in the South until the Civil War. As Virginia and Maryland began growing wheat, they needed skilled workers, so slaves began learning new skills to work in shops as well as in fields. Virginia and Maryland also needed fewer slaves because they had exhausted their land. Plantation owners in Virginia and Maryland encouraged their slaves to have more kids, so plantation owners could sell them internally and further into the South. The South thought that the language of freedom in the United States did not apply to slaves, and the number of slaves in the Deep South continued to increase. For women, the rise of Republican motherhood. Abigail Adams urged her husband, John Adams, to not forget the ladies while writing new rules or laws in the United States. John Adams largely ignored his wife Abigail, but we did see roles of women increase through Republican motherhood. Native Americans, slaves, and loyalists were grouped with the men, but they still had far fewer rights than pro-revolution white women. The American Revolution encouraged women to seek more rights. Through the idea of Republican motherhood, women would have an important but limited role. Women received a better education, advised their husbands, and gained some property rights, though rules and opportunities only applied to upper-class white women. Please pause your video to answer the 3 review questions from Section 1.